Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to those tuned in to the second edition of Alberta Live. I'm Sunita Kaul-Juchi. We are still nascent and exploring structure or the lack of it. Today it's just a conversation, a dialogue with Huff, the leader of Alberta Party. The party may not be much talked about, but it certainly is not a new kid on the block. It was formed in 1985. So I'll ask my guest Huff later on about it. A very warm welcome to you firstly. But before we enter into a live conversation, I'd like to give our viewers a brief background about the Alberta Party. So first we'll dip into what exactly the party is all about, because you have flirted around with quite a few parties over these 2 decades or so of your existence, and it has evolved and emerged into a different entity. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, we started in 1985, and it was a small group of people that came together that were very passionate about grassroots democracy. And it didn't really do a whole lot. I think it ran a couple of candidates over the years, but largely it wasn't a very strong political entity. And then about a year ago, a number of people were forming new parties, and they all met together at Reboot Alberta, which was a chance for citizens to come together and talk about the future of the province. And so what happened was they found they had some things in common, and they decided to merge. So the groups came together, and the existing Alberta Party suspended its policies and allowed us to go out and listen to Albertans and hear what it was they wanted. And from there, policy emerged, and here we are today. We're so in the new form, 10 months old.
But how do you get along with people from the Green Party, for instance? If I may take the liberty of saying so, I would term it as a bit of a leftist thinking ideology, considering that I've been reading something here by the former leader, that is Edwin Erickson, and he says, to tackle affordable housing in the province, the Greens propose a model of subsidized housing used in Vancouver. They build subsidized housing, and on the healthcare, they would pay the tuition of those studying to become healthcare professionals if they promise to remain in the province for 7 years after they graduate. This ideology is far apart from, let's say, the leftist or the centrist platform, the right wing or the center platform that you also are going to bed with.
Right.
So, if I may use that word. But, what exactly do you want the party to reflect? What do you want people to understand at the end of the day about you?
Well, I think when you talk about the left-right, and everyone is trying to pigeonhole us, where do you fit in? Are you between these two? Are you between those two? And what we're hearing when we listen to people is that Albertans really don't care a whole lot about ideology. They want the best answers. They want to feel that they have a voice in their government. And most Albertans are somewhere in the middle, right? There is a moderate, common sense, kind of down the middle of the road path that most Albertans want their government to take. And that's what we certainly heard loud and clear in our big listen. So some of our policies may feel a little bit left of center, some may feel a little bit right of center, and we don't really get fixated on that too much. It's the best ideas from all across the spectrum, and our membership actually is coming from all across the spectrum. So we do have some former Greens, we have former PCs, we have former Liberals, we have former NDs, and probably most exciting of all, we have former never belonged to a party in my life because I've never believed in politics. And those are the most exciting people, I think, that were really igniting passions in people who have never believed in politics. So that to me is enormously exciting, that we're able to bring all of these people together and we moderate each other's views. So it's never extreme. We're trying to reflect what everybody wants and try to find an answer that everyone can live with. You may not get everything you want, but you'll get enough of what you want to feel good about where we're going.
Some may argue, and let me play the devil's advocate here, how would you, if the Green Party with this kind of a stance comes on board and you form a coalition, that's a faraway possibility, but still, how would you smooth out all the nuances of policy? I mean, in an idealistic world, I understand what you're saying. I understand the idealism behind your statements. It's fantastic, but we don't live in an ideal world. We are having to cope up with three kind of completely antithetical policy issues. One that is subsidized housing, and at the same time we are running into an era where this is not going to be possible. This is, people are crying out foul about government spending. So how can you convince us that these three antithetical parties are eventually going to be able to give some kind of coherence to government?
Right. Well, first of all, it's not three parties. It's one party now. We are the Alberta Party, and we have committed to a process, the Big Listen process, which is really important to us, that people feel they have a voice in government. So everyone who joins us has to kind of buy into that idea, that the answers come from the people. It's not that a party is going to come up with the answers and then go out and sell those ideas. It's a reverse process. So when we come together as citizens, and we all have our own particular stance or our own particular issue that is really important to us, we have to understand, how does that fit into the larger context? How do my neighbors see that issue? How do people on the other side of this issue reflect and respond to what I'm saying? So when we come together in the Big Listen, what we hear is people moderating their views. So your burning issue may be, subsidized housing, or it may be the oil sands, or whatever. But you need to understand, where do you fit into the larger context? And people can do that, and they do that. And that's what's exciting, is to see people let go of a harsh, rigid dogma and start to see that the other guy has points too, right? That we all have wisdom to share, and that when we, for instance, in the issue of, let's take the issue of the environment, a lot of people have bought the idea that it has to be either or. You're either for the environment, which means you're automatically against, economy, or you're for the economy, which means you have to be against the environment. And for us, it isn't an either or, it's both. They're two sides of the same coin, and we have to learn to see things in a more holistic way.
So I'm going to interrupt you here. We have a live question here from, and it says, how does the Alberta Party propose to diversify our economy in a meaningful way? Example, how can we encourage technical innovation in Alberta?
Right. This is a great question, and certainly our policy around diversifying the economy tackles this very issue. What we heard from people in the Big Listen is that they're really tired of the boom and bust. They're tired of an economy that seems to be overly dependent on oil and gas. And they want us to diversify, because that's how we're going to have a sustainable future, right? It just makes sense to spread things out a little bit. We've heard a lot of people say they want to encourage more technical innovation in Alberta. We have a great resource, obviously. We're blessed, absolutely blessed, with incredible resources in this province. But some people feel that we're not actually fulfilling our potential in this area. We could be not just the best in the world, but the best for the world. We could be developing technologies here, green technologies, other technologies, which could be used by the rest of the world. So I think we have a lot of research happening here that's enormously exciting, and there's great potential. But again, that research is not being capitalized upon. It's not being turned into business and innovation. And that's where we see a lot of potential. So, to answer the question, we have a lot of people here who actually have great ideas around this, but those ideas aren't being capitalized upon.
So you did mention about the Big Listen. What was the major, going back to our earlier conversation, what was the one outstanding thing that, you said, oh, this is something that has come right from the grassroots? Because I know that this is a very novel concept that you indulged in. You just actually having people come over and talk. And so what was it that stands out in your mind?
Well, I think what we heard is that people feel very, very lucky to live here, that we won the lottery in so many respects, but that they don't feel there's enough long-term planning. People don't feel that we're, again, capitalizing on the enormous potential that we have here. We're just kind of coasting. We could be so much more. The other thing that I heard was that people are really wanting government to be open and transparent. They want to be engaged. They want to believe that politics is noble, and that there can be people of integrity involved in politics. But they see so many examples of things being done behind closed doors, or questionable practices, or MLAs that only seem to talk to them just before an election and never seen, the rest of the time. So there's a lot of people who feel disenfranchised, who don't feel their voice is acknowledged. So what we found in the Big Listen is that people suddenly felt alive. They felt awake. They were engaged. They were passionate about this province. They want it to be a great place for everyone, for their grandchildren. Enormous concern about future generations. People, who are baby boomers who say, I had a great, everything just, I had a great life, everything came to me, but I'm not so sure it's going to be there for my children and my grandchildren. There's a real concern about the next generation. But, the other thing that came out was this idea that there's a sense that there's a rural-urban divide, that what people want in urban Alberta is so, completely opposite to what rural Albertans want. What we heard in the Big Listen is actually we have an enormous amount in common, that there's more that unites us than divides us. And that was a really strong message for us, that people in rural Alberta are very concerned about the environment, right?
Oh, yes, so let me pin you down on that. Let me pin you down on this. Yeah. What exactly, how would you cope up with this? This is volatile, Environment is something that gets your blood churning. I work with environment. And how would you cope up with that bureaucracy? How would you cope up? Do you have a carbon tax in mind? Do you have a cap and trade in mind? Tell us about it.
Well, we have our environmental policy does touch on a number of different issues. We're very concerned about water, and that came out very clearly from people, that they want more effective monitoring of water, more effective charting of the groundwater, really having a deep understanding of where are we, what's happening, where are the conservation, what are the successes in conservation, where could we go further. But you're right, it is an enormously complex issue. But we have a lot of people who've done a lot of great work on this area, and sometimes those surveys and those reports and those great big fat binders just end up on somebody's shelf. And we need to start capitalizing on the intelligence and the wisdom of the people here who've done the work and who understand the issue. And I think people are ready to start talking about, we don't have something specific on carbon tax, but I think people are ready to start talking about how do we pay as we go? How do we ensure that we're paying our part and that we're not just passing off a huge problem to the next generation? I think Albertans are very responsible. They want to take responsibility for this great province, and I see a lot of potential there. And I again don't see it as pitting us against industry. I think there are people in industry who want this too. Right? They are concerned about their children just as much as I'm concerned about mine and you're concerned about yours, right? So it's, again, I don't buy into this confrontational ideology. I'm not buying it. I think we can cooperate.
I'm not going to let you go on this one. I need to pin you down on this one. We've said so much about it. So many. How do we, post-Obama, this is difficult to believe, Before Mr. Obama became President of the United States, it was euphoric. Yeah, we believed in that word change. Now it's difficult. I'm getting to be a skeptical woman, just...
And you don't want to be. You don't want to be.
I'm passionate, intense about environment as much. But at the same time, you have this huge problem of trying to make these two compatible. You have the oil sands as the main livelihood for a major part of our revenue comes from there. Yeah. And on the other hand, we want the environment to be good. What is so drastic that you would do as a party to evolve into cohesive policy?
I think it's going to require bravery. I really do. I think there's going to have to be some very courageous, clear parameters set out, expectations. We're calling for more effective monitoring, more effective regulation. That's one part of the toolbox. But there's also incentives. You don't just beat people into submission, right? You have to understand human behavior. You have to understand what motivates people to change. And we all have to change. It's not just the oil industry that has to change. We all as citizens have to change as well in our understanding of this issue, understanding of how we contribute to it. And what we can do effectively as individuals to solve it. We have to think globally, right? I mean, I know everyone's saying that, but we have to stop thinking that our piece of the pie is this small. We have to expand and start to see how our actions affect everyone else. We have to look at cumulative effects. So it's going to require a shift. I think we also need to change some of the systemic pieces of government. You talk about Obama, and I mean, he had an amazing engagement process. He ignited this passion, this citizenry, everyone, yes we can. It all got very hyped up. Then he went into a system that really did not want to perpetuate that. So we have to look at some of the systemic things that have to happen in government to continue that momentum of citizen engagement and to continue applying pressure on government to be responsive. Sometimes it feels like once MLAs get elected, they go behind this, wall, and it's very difficult for them to be effective inside that system, even though they had great intentions and great hopes and great aspirations. So we have to change what's going on inside the ledge as much as what's happening outside.
So to pin you down, what is your economic policy in terms of, people are looking for jobs. How would you go about creating the kind of environment? I'm an idealist too. I can understand. But how would you cope up with this huge wall of bureaucracy? I'm sorry I keep repeating that word bureaucracy. There's some wonderful bureaucrats out there who are passionate about environment. I don't know who eventually calls the shots, whether it's the politician or the bureaucracy, but I believe that both do have a role.
Yeah.
And how would you move this entire system? I mean, he came with all the good intentions, Mr. Obama did, and it just seems that the Republicans have taken over again, and he's still, his health care is uncertain. So given that kind of scenario, what would you do? Of course, first with the economic policy as well.
I think how we're seeing, and you keep wanting to separate out the policies, and so I'm going to come back and challenge you on this, that we don't see policy as being in a silo. So the economy is tied to the environment, is tied to health, is tied to education, is tied to democratic renewal. All of those pieces work together, right? So in terms of diversifying the economy, it's really important to see how education fits into that, right? If we don't have people who are trained and knowledgeable and ready to work in green technologies, for instance, then how can we ever move into that field without importing a whole bunch of workers from outside? We don't want to do that. We want to grow our knowledge base here. So I think there is a connection with post-secondary. There's even a connection with earlier education, right? We have to make sure that every single citizen is reaching their full potential. And that's why I think when we look at our policies, we say that education is actually the foundational piece for all other policy. We see education as having a really, really critical role to play in moving us forward as a province, in improving our health outcomes, right? Education and health obviously go together hand in hand. Education in the environment, education in the economy, right? It's all interconnected. So it's not that there's one silver bullet. I don't have a silver bullet for you, Sunita. I know you want one, but I don't have one. But what I do have is I think our party is very committed to trying to take a 360-degree view of very complex issues, bringing people together who have expertise in those areas. And we don't pretend to have all the answers, right? But I do believe the answers are out there in Albertans, and I have enormous faith in people. So I think when we create structures where the right people can come together in an environment of collaboration, where they don't feel defensive, where they don't feel they have to, defend their turf, I think some really innovative and creative ideas will come forward. And I believe that government can play a really fundamental role in creating those environments, not necessarily having the answers, but creating the environments where those answers can emerge. I think right now bureaucracy is tying a lot of people in knots, and I think there are people who want to do things and are hitting up against bureaucratic barriers, red tape, whatever. We need to look at those barriers and take them down in some cases, right? So it's not always about more government. It may be in some cases about less government in some areas, more government in other areas. And again, and this is why we kind of walk across those ideological barriers, because we don't feel that there is one answer. It's almost like each issue needs a fresh approach, a new lens. And always for us, it's really important that the public is involved in that. The public has to own these decisions.
Are you not scared of anarchy? a wee bit scared?
No, not at all.
Because at the end of the day, if you have your conventions in Delta South, was it?
Yeah.
One of those?
Yeah.
You're not getting that person who you talked about in your blog. I have it somewhere here, where you talked about people. How will you reach out to those people? They wouldn't even be able to afford that cup of coffee there, Is your mass base the same as that of the conservatives or as that of the liberals? What is different? If you're holding your conventions in Delta South with a cup of coffee or
you're talking about accessibility. How can we get more voices to the table?
These are the same voices.
Yes.
They're just shifting from one party to the other, being opportunists.
So. No, I don't think
You're
so.
You're tapping the same segment of society.
No, actually, what we're seeing is an enormous amount of young people coming and being engaged, and people who have told me, I have never belonged to a political party in my life. You're the first one that I've ever joined. So we are reaching a demographic that I don't think other parties are. We do a lot of stuff online. We do things like this. We're interested in alternative forms of communication as well as the traditional, because we recognize that not everybody is on Twitter, not everybody is online, but a lot of people are, and those are hyper-engaged people that we want to connect with. So we have a lot of young people on our board that are in their 20s. We don't have a kids table. We don't have a young Alberta Party coalition or whatever. If you're over 16 years of age, you're a member. You're a full member. You can vote. You can participate. And like I say, we have some 20-year-olds that are the head of some of our committees, right? So. And directors of our provincial board. So I think we are reaching people that other parties maybe aren't reaching. One of the biggest issues that I've been confronted with as I've been doing this job for 2.5 weeks.
That's it?
Yeah, only 2.5 weeks. Yeah.
I thought a month, November.
No, beginning of December I was brought on. So people come up to me and say, "You're splitting the vote. You're splitting our vote." And what's amazing is that every party has said that to me. So everyone thinks that we're splitting their vote, which is interesting. And my answer to that is we're actually not really aiming to split anyone's vote. We're interested in the 60% of Albertans who did not vote in the last election.
There are rumors, correct me if I'm wrong, the grapevine has it, that there's an overture from one particular party, members of which were previously right-wing Alberta Party people, and now they've done this crossover and gone to Wild Rose. And I believe that's the only overture that you received. Now, I know it's talking prematurely, but what are your political aspirations? Do you aspire?
Me personally?
No. I mean, you represent the party, so
yeah.
I mean, I would take this opportunity to ask you how would you look at the future role of the party that you're leading? What's your aspiration as a party? Do you want to form the government at some point?
Yes, I think every party has that aspiration. If they don't, then I don't know why they would why they would enter into this, right? You don't enter to lose, and I don't think anybody enters thinking, well, what I really want is to be, second or third best. I mean, everybody wants to be first best. So yes, we have, aspirations to be the next government. That's obviously a vertical incline. That's an enormous goal to set for ourselves. But we believe in setting high goals and seeing where we get along that continuum,
So where do you go first? I believe you had just one MLA, one member of...
No, we have nobody right now.
The last election, that's what I read somewhere, that...
There's one candidate that's run for the Alberta Party, but we've never had an elected...
so you're faced with a mammoth task. You as a leader, this is a real challenging task for you.
It is.
So as a person, I mean, how would you go about it? I know it's really tough to get so many people on board.
Yeah.
What is it that you would be offering those MLAs? There are so many other rooted political parties, so what would you do to attract them?
Well, to answer your first question about what's the plan and how much work is ahead of you, I will be the acting leader for 6 months, and then we will be electing a new leader at the end of May. And I won't be running in that because our rules don't allow me to do that. So over the next 6 months, we have to build our constituency associations across the province. We have to start looking for candidates and build our membership, grow our bank account, and do all those things that every party has to do in order to get ready for an election. So we have a strategic plan, and our board has set very, very high targets for me and for our party organizer to hit, to try and move us along that goal. In terms of what would we have to offer if someone is thinking about running, and I encourage you to think about that, what do we have to offer, and why would they come to run for the Alberta Party as opposed to running for any other of the political parties? I think what we're seeing is that people are hungry for a new type of politics, politics where the voice of the constituent is paramount, where really the responsibility is from the MLA to the constituent and back, not necessarily that hyper strong relationship between MLA and party, which you see in a number of other parties. So we just came out with the MLA guidelines, where we talk about free votes, where we talk about how we want MLAs to represent their constituents, and that is really fundamentally important to us. Where other parties have party whips, and you may want to vote a certain way to represent your constituents, but you're told by the party you must vote this way. And then I think a lot of MLAs become very conflicted. It's very difficult to feel like you're serving two masters. So for us, it's very clear who your master is. It's public. And I think that will appeal to a number of people who would like to serve in that way, who believe in a servant leadership model. They may go, well, this is a better fit for me. I think we're also, when we talk about civility, also part of our guidelines, and how you must behave in the ledge, and we don't want the heckling and the catcalling and the thumping and all the ridiculous behavior that is quite embarrassing to most people. I think a number of candidates will look at that and go, yeah, that's the way I want to conduct myself. I don't want to have to be embarrassed about my behavior. I don't want to have to feel like I have to explain it to my children. Why are you behaving that way? You won't let me behave that way. So I think that will appeal. I think the structures that we're trying to formulate to support MLAs in this very, very difficult work, and having been an elected official with the school board for 3 years, I can tell you it's enormously challenging work, and emotionally, psychologically, and physically. I think we're trying to create a supportive environment for those people to do the good work. I think most politicians enter into politics because they want to make a difference, because they want to do the right thing, because they want to make things better for other people. When they get into the system, sometimes they find that it's enormously frustrating and they can't achieve those things they wanted to achieve. We're trying to look at those systems and look at those barriers and see if we can create an environment where those good people can do the things they want to do and continue to be good people in the process of being a politician. And be true to their conscience, be true to their values, and I think that's really important. And I think people who have come from perhaps a municipal background, where you don't have this hyper-partisan behavior, where you can sit together with people who see the world differently and wrestle through issues and not have to vote a party line. I think people who've come from that background may find our party more appealing than some of the others, because again of these structures that we're trying to set up to support that work.
So do you have any deadlines for instance, do you have any people who are already you have in mind as MLAs, or is it going to take a long while for you to?
We have a number of people who are waiting in the wings. Where the first step is to establish the constituency association, and then the CA is the one who actually has to do the process to get the candidates, right? To nominate the candidates and decide ultimately, if they have a couple of people, they have to decide which one is going to be the successful candidate. But yeah, we have a number of people across the province who have expressed interest and expressed their intention to us to run for us. So over the next 6 months or so, I would imagine that some of those names will start to emerge, and I'm not going to out them right now because there's a process, but we do have people, and it seems more people every day are starting to think about it, and my job is to really stimulate that and to encourage that and to support those people of integrity, people who are deeply connected to their community, people who have a strong sense of democracy and wanting to serve the public. Those are the people that we want to connect with.
So eventually, if you do emerge as as a potential alliance partner, who do you think you would be ideologically or be able to go along with? Would it be?
Well, I think, like I say, our policies actually reflect, a bouncing back and forth over this moderate middle ground. So I think if we had MLAs, which I'm sure we will, in the House in the next after the next election, that they will be voting really on an issue by issue basis and looking at where are the good ideas and supporting the good ideas, as opposed to saying, well, we're always going to line up with the Liberals, or we're always going to line up with the NDs, or we're always going to line up with the PCs or the Wild Rose or whatever. I can't see it ever being an all or nothing scenario. I think it would be a matter of individual issue by issue, and again reflecting the views and values of Albertans. And so I think it always ties back for us into what does the public want. It's not really about what does the party want, it's what does the public want here. What makes sense to most people? How does this reflect their aspirations for what they want this province to be?
But people are also looking for leadership. For instance, you just can't keep going back and forth between people and then re-evolving policy, because you're not going to get an even keel with everyone. Some people may like something, there'll be discord everywhere. So it's going to be, it seems that it's, it's evolving, your ideology is still evolving.
Yeah.
So it's, it seems as if there seems to be a certain kind of, very nascent kind of, you seem to be at a very nascent stage at the moment. How would you be prepared if the government just decides to go in for an election, as has been threatened in the past, in the next 6 months? What would your position be then?
Well, we've established policy around the 5 areas that I mentioned. We're going to be developing policy around 5 more areas starting in January. So even worst case scenario, if there was an election in 6 months, which I sincerely hope there isn't, but if there is, we would have policy developed in 10 areas. We would have a number of CAs already up and running, and we would have a number of candidates ready to go. We would not be able to run a full slate in 6 months, I'll be honest with you. That's just not organizationally possible. And we don't want to, kill people in the process of trying to present a viable option. I really hope that the election happens when Premier Stelmach has said it will happen, which is the spring of 2012. If that's the case, and they hold true to that promise, then we intend to run a full slate of candidates. We will have a full platform, and we will be a very clear and viable option for people that that don't feel they have a political home right now, which is, as I say, well over half of Albertans don't have a political home.
60% is what you wrote in your blog.
Yeah.
But I wonder, how would you get them back into the fray? It's so much there's so much disenchantment. How would you? What would you do to fire there?
Well, I think the big listen process is an enormously engaging part of that, but we're also looking at ramping it up in other ways, right? I mean, it's each one of those big listens, it only assembles 10 people or 12 people in the living room, so you'd have to be doing thousands of them to really reach all of Alberta. And that's certainly our aim, is to multiply it in that way. But there are lots of other opportunities in terms of technology, crowdsourcing. We could. There's so many things that we can do to reach out to people and really show them how their voice is used. And right now, a lot of the consultation process is used by government, and I've been on the other side of the table for many of those. I tend to sign up for things and want to participate, so I've been to lots of different events. What I've felt as a participant is that I invest, half day or a full day of my time to give my input, and the whole format is set out. Someone else has determined what the questions are, and I have to fill it in according to someone else's idea. And I sit there and I try to be a good girl, and I try to, to really be my best as a citizen. At the end of the day, I feel really frustrated because the thing that I wanted to talk about wasn't on the sheet. And so all of my input, I feel like it goes into this black hole, and I never see how it comes back to reflect what it was that I was saying. And so I feel very frustrated with that type of consultation. I think we, with the Alberta Party, are trying to really show people the direct link between their input and what happens, what comes out of it. And to continue that relationship, to have a feedback loop, to make sure that people feel continually connected. It's not just a one-shot deal. You give your input and then you go away. We really want people to be engaged on an ongoing basis, because it's a circle. It's
so
not
I'll play
line.
the devil's advocate again. How would you, there are so many people with different ideologies, their own agendas, their economic conditions, their health conditions, their physical conditions. How would you amalgamate all this into cohesive policy? The one thing that comes across through your very coherent answer to all my questions, one thing that stands out is your belief in grassroots democracy, as perhaps the Greeks believed in. It's kind of utopia. No, I myself belong to that, a very idealistic kind of thing. The point is here that there are so many. There's too much going on. To play the devil's advocate, some people would say we are far beyond that stage. Humanity has evolved on a different platform, that we can't go back to what the state that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's utopia, but I do think we need to return to democracy. So I don't feel that a lot of our systems right now are particularly democratic. I think that there are some people who have enormous influence, whose voice is heard loud and clear, and then there's a whole bunch of other people who can't even be heard. So I think we need to actually return to some of those fundamental ideas of what democracy is supposed to be, and find ways, using technology, using the resources that we have today, which, you look at how the world is connecting and how people are able to connect, and how things are able, things emerge because someone here and someone there and someone in another part of the country are all working together. I don't see why democracy can't be like that. I really believe that we've got an antiquated system that needs to be updated. We need to start using all of these resources that are available, this technology that's available, and get smarter. I don't feel that government has kept pace with the rest of the world. When you look at how, for instance, look at journalism and how it used to be only certain people that could write the article, and the editor got to decide which pieces went in, and there was a very tightly controlled message. It was in the hand of a very small group of people. And now look at journalism. Journalism is anybody who has a camera, and anybody can write a blog, and the influence of that being put into the hands of regular people, where there aren't the same types of tight controls. That's democracy, right? That's using technology to create a more democratic society where all voices are equal, or all voices have the potential to be equal. And I just don't feel that our current political structures have kept pace with that. And I think we can do an enormous amount to move that agenda forward. But in terms of your question about how do you balance all of these ideas and all of these needs and all of these different points of view and competing points of view, that's something that I came across firsthand when I was a trustee, right? I had an enormous ward with so many diverse needs, and how do you balance all of that and decide how to vote on an issue? Because at the end of the day, decisions have to be made, bills have to be passed or rejected, you have to come to a point of decision. And I think you use all of that input in the best way you can as a flawed human being, right? To try and make decisions best you can. And then your job is to explain why you did that. Again, using technology, using ways to communicate. So people, they may not agree with your decision. In fact, a lot of people won't agree with your decision, but at least they'll understand how you got there. You can be completely open and transparent in your decision making. Do it in the light of day. Don't do it behind closed doors. Build trust and confidence in government by being open. And that is something that we need to really move the ball on. I don't feel that our current government structures are very open. And I think a lot of people have a lot of suspicion about, well, who's deciding, who's really funding this, what's the agenda, who's behind it. And I think we need to just bring everything out into the light of day and let people understand that, of course, there are trade-offs. Of course, we can't all have exactly what we want, right? We're going to have to come to some agreement about, you can have this or you can have this, but you can't have both. Which one do you want more? And we have to have those kind of really grown-up adult conversations with people and with the public, and I believe they're ready for it and they can handle it.
So coming to other issues, leaving this behind, I have some issues here which I was wondering if you could tell us,
Sure.
What does your party think about the current health crisis, for instance, that's brewing in the in the province of Alberta?
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, healthcare has obviously been front and center in a lot of the news lately, and particularly for urban areas, it's really a hot button issue, and people get very emotional, of course, because health is vital. Our policy around health has a number of key pillars. One of them is prevention, which I don't hear enough people talking about. We tend to focus on the end, the acute care problems, the emergency care problems, and all of that. And of course, that's the obvious symptom of the system where there's problems. But we need to go back and look at what could have been prevented, what disease could have been prevented, so we don't have to end up in acute care. So our policy has a lot of talk about prevention, investment in prevention, looking at childhood obesity, looking at education, so that we can't just keep pumping more and more money into healthcare. We have to start preventing some of these issues and dealing with them when they're small. Nipping it in the bud, getting there early, so that it doesn't become a full-blown medical emergency that costs thousands of dollars to treat. So prevention is key. Mental health strategy, we're very focused on that people feel that a lot of money is being used in terms of not treating mental health issues and addiction. Again, very, very costly, but we want to create a comprehensive mental health strategy. Primary care, again, because if you have a good primary care relationship, your family doctor can help you enormously in that prevention cycle, so that you can deal with issues before they end up and emerge. And a lot of people don't have a family doctor, so that's something that we really want to invest in, and also looking at making sure that no matter where you live, that you have access to that. So in some cases that may mean incentives to have more family doctors working in rural areas, that kind of thing. So there's so those are some of the key parts of our health strategy.
I want to draw your attention. There's a blog, Troy Media, and Stephen has written this. Missed appointments in general practice and hospitals account for between 6 to 10% of all appointment times in the healthcare system. We don't have the courage to go deep into the root causes of the problem. For instance, the waste within the system.
Right.
I mean, we have all this noise about how we are spending so much on the healthcare and how little we are spending on the healthcare. There's so much money going down the drain, you think? What's your opinion about that?
I've heard that concern, and I'm not a healthcare professional, so I'm not going to pretend to have intimate knowledge of where the waste in the system might be. But I know that people are concerned about that, and I think that that's important to look at. I think the people who have the answers to that are the frontline workers, and I think we need to spend a lot more time listening to people who are actually doing the job day in, day out. They can identify where there might be some efficiencies in the system. And again, I think that ties back into our belief that the answers lie with Albertans. So, someone asked me once, well, would you have flown someone in from another part of the world to solve our problems? And my quick answer is no, because I think that the answers are here. Yes. So why would we not start with that? And I think there are a lot of frontline workers who feel that they've got great ideas and no one's listening. They understand what needs to be done differently, but again, no one's listening. So I think we need to really evaluate how are we using the expertise and the knowledge that we have on the ground, and are we really implementing those ideas? And I think that we aren't. So I think there's great potential there. But clearly, if there are areas of waste, we need to address that. I'm by nature a very, very frugal person. I don't like waste. I think we can be very wasteful as a society when we have so much. It's easy to think, well, what difference does it make if I throw that out or whatever? So I think we need to start really examining our practices and see if there are areas that we can do better.
Do you think that productivity needs to, the productivity of individuals needs to be enhanced as well? Because Canada is, as far as the OECD is concerned, it's low on productivity. So these are some issues which, I don't know, there's so much of a debate needed on whether there's healthcare, whether healthcare needs to be privatized, which, according to Stephen, is already so privatized because we have doctors whom the government is paying, and 70% of the bills are paid by the government. So there's this whole debate, not about, and also about hard issues like euthanasia, which is being already discussed in Quebec, I believe. I'm not too certain of whether they're continuing with the conversation. There's so many hard decisions to be made, and no political party seems to be having the will to get into, to nosedive into these issues. We're just trying to say everything is perfect. Everything is perfect in Alberta. How much strength does it need to address these kind of issues?
Oh, I say courage, I think, is really, really critical. I think if you're going to move into political life, if you're going to move into public service, you require an enormous amount of courage, and I think that's what people want. They want to see leaders who are willing to tackle very difficult issues and willing to, in some cases, suffer the consequences of making difficult decisions, which hopefully are always made with a long-term view, right? I think there's a cynicism that's evolved that people feel politicians are only concerned about the next election. They're only concerned about getting re-elected, maintaining power or getting power, and we need to really move to a state where people feel that politicians are there for a long-term view and a long-term benefit, not necessarily for personal benefit or short-term. So I think, when we talk about some of these really complex, difficult, divisive issues where the Alberta Party doesn't have a stance, we don't have a stance on euthanasia, we don't have a stance on some of these really difficult topics, it's not because we're avoiding it, it's because it didn't emerge from our big listens as one of the main themes. If there is an issue that emerges from people as, we need you to have it, we need to talk about this, we need to hear where we're going on this issue, then we will do that, right? But it's not that we're avoiding certain topics, just that euthanasia, for one, didn't come up in the big listen as one of the main pressure points for people or one of the main issues to discuss. But certainly I think our process around listening to what people need, listening to what issues are burning for people, and then having an intelligent, comprehensive discussion around that issue. I think that's the process by which we'll find the answers to these issues.
I still would like you to answer the question, what would you do in terms of the healthcare? Do you think it's punctured somewhere or fractured somewhere? And do you think it needs money, or do you think that it needs to remove the inefficiencies that have crept up into the system? Do you think systems are getting the better of us? I mean, do you think we need to re-examine, and not in an environment of histrionics, I understand that members of the Legislative Assembly may have certain disagreements within their party, but the whole point is to take it seriously and to re-examine within the party some issues, and then go to the public and say, I'm frustrated, this party just doesn't, that is what I believe it was all about. I'm referring to the recent healthcare episode in Alberta. But the point is that, how would you look at it? Is it inefficiency? Is it lack of money? Is it lack of productivity? What have you come to the conclusion?
Well, I don't know that we've come to a conclusion about what the exact nature of what needs to be done beyond what I've told you about prevention and primary care and mental health strategy and investing in early childhood development and looking at things from a longer term. In terms of how to fix it right now, how to get in there and do the surgery, I don't think that we have the answers, and I think anybody who pretends that they have the answers is doing just that. They're pretending. I don't think there is a silver bullet, again, for this. I think we can learn a lot by talking to the people who are doing the job. I think what we heard loud and clear from people is that they want a publicly funded, publicly administered, fiscally responsible healthcare system. They don't want privatization. So that's our stance, because that's what we heard from people that they want. Now, how do you make a publicly funded, publicly administered, fiscally responsible system given the demographics we have, which are aging, given the fact that there is an unending demand and desire for healthcare. I mean, it can go as big, and it's like an inflatable raft, right? It's just so big, right? So what are the limits to what we can deliver as a publicly funded, publicly administered healthcare system? And how can we balance the needs of people while being good stewards of this system, rather than trying to pull it apart or hive it off or create some sort of two-tiered system. People don't want that. They want us to make this work, and I think we can. We need to be really brave about saying, what are we doing, and is this the best way to do it? Is there another way to do it? And do we need to? Do you have a question?
We have a question.
Oh, okay. I'll stop talking and I'll listen.
If you were the Premier today, what is your number one issue to address on behalf of Albertans? What would be your number one priority?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's easy to say healthcare because that's the one that people are talking about the most right now. But I think the number one issue right now is this idea of marrying the economy and the environment. I really feel that obviously the economy here, if we don't have a healthy economy, if we don't have a diversified economy, then all of these other issues are going to be very, very difficult to meet. So we need to have a vibrant, sustainable economy, which is environmentally responsible. And I think when we think about the future of the province, the reputation of the province, the future for our grandchildren, those two issues have to come together in a way that's sustainable. So I think that's where we would go. It's a great question. Thank you.
It's really a tough battle ahead. But
I know.
Do you think you would? Have you given thought to the Conservatives? Do you think you would at some point consider, hypothetically, joining or having alliance with any party, or would it be just restricted to a few?
Well, I don't know what you mean by alliance. Maybe just explain to me what you mean by alliance.
Outside support, or if you don't emerge as a potent, viable single party.
You mean okay.
So would you be, if you wanted to, if you were given an opportunity to throw your weight behind a former coalition kind of government in the province, which party is it that you would align yourself with?
I don't think we would align with any party at this point, other than to say that on certain issues we may vote in support of a party's idea if we feel it's the best idea, right? So, but the idea of merging or aligning on a permanent basis, I don't think that's in the cards for us. I really feel that we're trying to carve out another space, and we're trying to be a viable option for people who don't feel that what's currently on offer is not appealing. And I think that's the vast majority of Albertans, even people that I've spoken to, who said, well, I always vote. So they're one of that 40%. They always vote. And this woman said to me, I always vote because I feel I have to, as a citizen. But I've never been excited about my vote. I've never felt passionate about it. I've gone, I've done it. It's like, it's like washing the floor. You just got to do it, but you're not really happy about it. And so I would like to see people become quite a bit more engaged than that, So I think there's enormous potential there to stimulate something that's it's more than a chore. It shouldn't be a chore. It should be engaging and energizing. Really, people should feel that they are contributing to something that's really important, that's going to make things better for a whole bunch of people, not just for themselves as individuals.
So the question is, what about immigration and immigrants? What is your viewpoint on that?
Well, we don't have a policy per se on immigrants, but what I can say is that we're actively trying to reach out to the multicultural communities and make sure that their voice is also part of this process. Because what we know is that many people who come here, they don't necessarily feel it's their place to contribute to the conversation. They have this sense that, well, this is someone else's country, and I'll just do my job and take care of my children, and that's it. And what we really want people to understand is that this is their province too. And Alberta is becoming more and more multicultural all the time. We certainly see it in our school, all of our schools in Edmonton and Calgary, and in rural Alberta as well. And we are a province that welcomes people from all over the world. So we want them to be part of this process as well. So we're like I say, we're actively reaching out. I was in Calgary yesterday, and there was two brothers that are setting up a constituency association in Calgary with a very heavy ethnic population, and they are from visible minority group, and they are actively engaged in bringing their community to our party. And they really feel that this is a place where their community can participate and be full members. And I said, absolutely, and any ideas you have on reducing barriers, if there are cultural barriers, if there are language barriers, if there are other issues that are stopping people from participating, we want to know, because we really want those voices at the table too. Very important to us.
What about foreign policy? I know that's the central issue, but we've had instances in the past where we've had to deal a lot with the United States because of the rich oil resources they export to the U.S. What do you think needs to be done as far as provincial outlook for policy on this issue goes? That's a pertinent question that's been asked by...
In terms of foreign investment, or in terms of trade, or in terms
of dealing with issues like, the anti-oil sands. We've been trying to advocate the fact that it's our main livelihood, and there have been campaigns against them. How do you deal with issues like that? And also the whole thing, the center-provincial relationship that comes into mind because of this, there may be at some point the CO2 emissions may be a bottleneck as far as growth in Alberta goes. But what's been your feedback? People are passionate about environment?
Oh, absolutely. I think people really, again, want a balanced view and approach. And I think that, it's always difficult when you feel you're being criticized. The natural reaction whenever you face criticism is to get defensive and to want to say, no, you're wrong, and we're nice people, and please don't be like that with us. And so but I think we have to move beyond defensiveness and actually start to hear criticism as an opportunity to get to a better answer, right? And I think that attitude of openness and being willing to listen to what is the best research, what is the best thinking on this issue, how can we move forward on this. I think that will always get you further down the road than just being defensive. And the last issue of it just came out yesterday, I believe, talking about there hasn't been enough monitoring and this independent study that was done. And the response the government had to that, I thought, was actually far more reasonable than the response they'd had a few months back, right? Which was, they said, well, there's some good information here, we're going to take it, we're going to move forward, we're going to listen. And I think that's the approach that you take with any kind of criticism that comes from other parts of the world. And I think in terms of developing trade and all of those things, obviously there's enormous potential there, and we do export enormous amounts of product to the rest of the world. What we have heard is that people don't think that just exporting raw materials is the best and most sensible way to go about it. There's a whole value-added industry that we're not capitalizing on again, and there's a number of reports that have come out about how much money we're losing by not upgrading these raw materials. And I think that obviously that makes perfect sense to me, and it makes perfect sense to Albertans, that you want to develop the materials here so then you can sell them at a higher level. So I think there's lots to...
Why do you think the government is shying away from that? I remember in the Middle East when I was there for about 9 or 10 years, and there was a furor. And even the Middle East, a country like Saudi Arabia, started moving on from raw export to developing its petrochemical industry. Dubai moved on. I don't understand what halts us there. What makes us hold our horses there?
Yeah, I don't know that. Again, I'm not an expert in oil and gas either. I'm not an expert in many things, but I think that there's issues around capacity. What do we have here in terms of industry and technology, and do we have what we need right now to do this work? And I think we are a little bit behind. I think we should have probably thought of this quite a few years ago, and then developed all of the needed infrastructure to do that. But let's acknowledge where we are and really be aggressive about trying to get caught up so that we can do it here. And I think there's no reason why we can't. We have all the, we have enormous wealth. We have enormous potential in terms of our educated population. We have a number of, post-secondary centers here. I think with a concerted effort, we could certainly get caught up rather quickly. But it's really, again, part of that diversified economy is seeing what you have here and being able to capitalize on all of the potentials and all of the opportunities. And I think just exporting raw materials is it's a little bit lazy, and we need to be a bit more conscious about what we're sending out to let other people profit on.
How would you attract investment into Alberta, considering now there's going to be massive inter-provincial competition? Whatever little I can see is I can foresee is the fact that there are projects, energy projects in Newfoundland, Labrador, and oil companies would perhaps like to weigh their incentives. Do you think that needs to be looked at again, or do you think that's...
I think what we heard from people when we were doing our big listen is that they want a fair relationship with industry. There is a sense that we may be making decisions that don't properly value what we have here. This is a resource. It's a gift. And we need to really acknowledge that it's a gift not just for us today, but it's a gift for our children and our grandchildren. So we have to be really, clear owners of this resource. And that means that you're going to have some tough negotiations, really. I think people don't want us to keep giving it away. There's a sense that we're giving it away, and we don't want to give away the inheritance of our children. And we want to be responsible stewards of this resource. And sort of grown-up owners of it, really, and I think we're certainly ready for that. We did hear a lot about royalties, and some people feel that we need to have to be getting higher royalties. It's not part of our policy yet, because I think we need to discuss this more and understand it more deeply. But I think there is a sense that we have an enormous resource. And there are very few places in the world that have what we have. And there are very few places in the world that have what we have also with a stable, political system, and we have no war, and all of those things, right? So obviously we are in a very attractive place to do business, and we need to start seeing ourselves that way.
Thank you so much once again.
Are we done?
Thank you.
No more questions out there? Come on, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
That's it for today from Alberta Live. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed watching this interview with Sue Huff. And our next program, as promised, would be on healthcare. Watch out for it. We'll keep you informed. And have a fantastic weekend. Thank you.